The Stoic habit that weak men fear. A weak man avoids silence because silence forces him to hear the truth. He fills every moment with noise, distractions, excuses, and people because he is terrified of being alone with his own mind. But the Stoic man does the opposite. He sits in silence. He studies his thoughts. He watches his emotions. And in that silence, he becomes dangerous. Because the habit that weak men fear most is not waking up early. It is not working harder. It is not reading more books. The habit weak men fear most is disciplined solitude. The ability to sit alone without escaping. The ability to face your own flaws without blaming the world. The ability to spend time in silence until your mind becomes stronger than your emotions. Most men cannot do this. That is why they stay weak. That is why they stay distracted. That is why they never become who they were meant to be. In this video, you will discover why solitude terrifies weak men, how great Stoics used it to build unshakable strength, and how you can use it to transform your life. Stay until the end because the final lesson may completely change the way you see yourself. Introduction. We live in a world where people are constantly running. Running from boredom. Running from silence. Running from uncomfortable thoughts. The average person wakes up and immediately reaches for their phone. They scroll through endless videos. They search for entertainment. They need noise in the background. They cannot sit quietly. They cannot walk without music. They cannot eat without a screen. And they definitely cannot spend 1 hour alone with their thoughts. Why? Because silence exposes weakness. When the noise disappears, the truth becomes louder. You start thinking about the goals you keep delaying. You start remembering the promises you made to yourself. You start seeing the habits that are destroying your future. And for many men, that truth is unbearable. So they escape. They distract themselves. They stay busy but never productive. They talk a lot but never grow. They surround themselves with people but still feel empty. The Stoics understood something powerful. A man who cannot be alone cannot be strong. Because if you always need distraction, then distraction controls you. If you always need validation, then other people control you. If you cannot sit in silence, then your emotions control you. That is why disciplined solitude is one of the most powerful habits you can ever build. It forces you to confront yourself. It forces you to become honest. It forces you to develop inner strength. And once you have that strength, the world can no longer manipulate you. Coming up next, you will discover why weak men are terrified of being alone. Chapter 1: Why weak men fear solitude. Weak men fear solitude because solitude removes every excuse. When you are alone, there is nobody to impress. Nobody to blame. Nobody to distract you. Nobody to hide behind. It is only you and the truth. And the truth can be painful. A man may realize he wasted years chasing approval. He may realize he stayed in toxic relationships because he feared loneliness. He may realize he talks about success but never takes action. He may realize he is not tired. He is simply undisciplined. Weak men do not want to face these truths. They want comfort. They want entertainment. They want instant pleasure. That is why they constantly seek crowds, noise, and attention. They would rather spend hours scrolling through meaningless content than spend 30 minutes reflecting on their life. Because deep down, they know reflection would force them to change. And change is uncomfortable. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that most suffering comes from within. Not from the world. Not from other people. From your own mind. From your own judgments. From your own lack of control. A weak man always looks outside himself. He blames his family. He blames society. He blames bad luck. He blames other people for his failures. But a strong man looks inward. He asks himself difficult questions. What am I doing wrong? What habits are keeping me weak? What fears are controlling me? What must I change? These are dangerous questions because they destroy excuses. And once excuses are destroyed, only responsibility remains. That is why weak men avoid solitude. Because solitude forces responsibility. And responsibility is heavy. But it is also the beginning of power. Coming up next, you will discover how solitude sharpens the mind and turns ordinary men into disciplined men. Chapter 2: How solitude sharpens the mind. A distracted mind is a weak mind. A man who is constantly surrounded by noise loses the ability to think clearly. He reacts instead of reflecting. He follows instead of leading. He consumes instead of creating. But solitude changes that. When you spend time alone, your mind becomes sharper. You start noticing patterns. You start understanding your emotions. You start seeing the difference between what matters and what does not. This is why many of the greatest thinkers in history valued solitude. Because deep thinking cannot happen in chaos. Clarity cannot happen in noise. Wisdom cannot grow in constant distraction. Imagine a muddy lake. If the water is constantly disturbed, you cannot see through it. But if the water becomes still, everything becomes clear. Your mind works the same way. When you are always busy, your thoughts remain muddy. When you slow down and sit in silence, the mind begins to settle. And suddenly, you see your life more clearly. You see what is helping you. You see what is hurting you. You see who belongs in your life and who does not. You see what goals actually matter. You see what habits need to die. This is why solitude is powerful. It does not just make you calmer. It makes you smarter. It gives you the ability to think for yourself. And in a world full of followers, a man who can think for himself becomes rare. That rarity becomes strength. That strength becomes confidence. And that confidence cannot be faked. Coming up next, you will learn why disciplined solitude gives you emotional control that weak men never develop. Chapter 3: Solitude builds emotional control. Weak men are controlled by emotions. They get angry easily. They panic easily. They quit easily. They let every insult destroy them. They let every rejection break them. They let every setback stop them. Why? Because they never learned how to sit with discomfort. They never learned how to control themselves. They only know how to react. The Stoics believed that true power comes from self-control. Not controlling other people. Controlling yourself. And solitude is where that control is built. When you sit alone without distractions, you are forced to experience your emotions directly. You feel bored. You feel anxiety. You feel regret. You feel anger. But instead of escaping, you stay. You observe. You breathe. You learn. And over time, something powerful happens. Your emotions stop controlling you. You begin controlling them. You realize that feelings are temporary. You realize that discomfort cannot kill you. You realize that most fears are illusions. And when you realize this, you become harder to break. A man who can sit alone in silence for an hour becomes mentally stronger than the men who cannot sit still for 5 minutes. Because discipline is not built in comfort. It is built in resistance. It is built in silence. It is built in moments when nobody is watching. That is where true strength is born. Coming up next, you will discover the daily Stoic practice that can help you build this strength in your own life. Chapter 4: The Daily Stoic Practice of Solitude. The good news is that you do not need to disappear into the mountains for 30 days. You do not need to isolate yourself from the world. You simply need to create small moments of disciplined solitude every day. Start with 10 minutes. 10 minutes without your phone. 10 minutes without music. 10 minutes without entertainment. Sit quietly. Walk quietly. Write down your thoughts. Ask yourself honest questions. What am I avoiding? What is making me weak? What do I need to improve? What kind of man do I want to become? At first, this will feel uncomfortable. That is normal. Because you are breaking an addiction to distraction. But the more you practice, the stronger you become. Soon, you will no longer fear silence. You will crave it. Because silence becomes your weapon. It becomes the place where you recover your focus. It becomes the place where you strengthen your mind. It becomes the place where you reconnect with your purpose. Most men will never do this. That is why most men remain average. But you are different. You are here because part of you knows that you are capable of more. Part of you knows that you are tired of weakness. Part of you knows that distraction is stealing your life. And if you are brave enough to spend time alone with yourself, you will begin to discover a version of you that is stronger, calmer, wiser, and more disciplined. Coming up next is the final lesson, where you will discover why the strongest men are never afraid to stand alone. Chapter 5: Why Weak Men Need Constant Validation. Weak men need constant validation because they do not know who they are. They need compliments to feel important. They need attention to feel valuable. They need approval to feel confident. Without those things, they feel empty. That is why they spend so much time trying to impress people. They buy things they cannot afford. They pretend to be stronger than they are. They chase status. They chase popularity. They chase acceptance. But no amount of attention can fix a weak mind. Because if your confidence depends on other people, then other people control your confidence. The Stoics believe that real confidence comes from character. Not appearance. Not money. Not popular. Character. And character is built in private. It is built when nobody is watching. It is built when you choose discipline over comfort. It is built when you keep promises to yourself. A man who depends on validation becomes easy to manipulate. One insult can destroy him. One rejection can break him. One failure can make him quit. But a man who finds strength in solitude becomes different. He does not need everyone to understand him. He does not need everyone to support him. He does not need everyone to agree with him. Because he already knows who he is. And when a man truly knows who he is, he becomes almost impossible to control. Coming up next, you will discover why silence gives you an advantage that most people never realize. Chapter 6: Silence gives you power. Weak men talk too much. They reveal all their plans. They reveal all their emotions. They reveal all their weaknesses. They want people to notice them. They want people to praise them. They believe that talking makes them powerful. But the Stoics understood something different. Silence is power. A silent man observes more. He listens more. He learns more. He notices details that other people miss. While everyone else is busy talking, he is studying. While everyone else is reacting emotionally, he is staying calm. While everyone else is chasing attention, he is building himself. Silence creates mystery. Silence creates control. Silence gives you time to think before you act. Most mistakes happen because people react too quickly. They speak when they should stay quiet. They act when they should wait. They let emotions take control. But a man who has mastered silence becomes patient. And patience is a dangerous advantage. Because the man who stays calm while others panic is usually the man who wins. The man who listens while others talk is usually the man who learns the most. The man who remains silent while others seek attention is usually the man who builds the deepest strength. Never underestimate the power of silence. Because silence is not weakness. Silence is preparation. And the man who knows how to stay silent often becomes the strongest man in the room. Conclusion. The strongest men in history were never afraid to stand alone. They were never afraid to be misunderstood. They were never afraid to walk a different path. Because they knew something weak men never learn. If you cannot be alone, you cannot be free. Freedom begins when you no longer depend on constant noise. Freedom begins when you no longer need validation from others. Freedom begins when you can sit in silence and still feel complete. Disciplined solitude is not loneliness. It is training. It is where your mind becomes sharper. It is where your emotions become calmer. It is where your purpose becomes clearer. And it is where your strength is built. So the next time you feel the urge to escape into noise, stop. Sit with yourself. Face the truth. Ask the difficult questions. Because the habit that weak men fear most may be the exact habit that transforms your life. And once you master it, you will no longer fear being alone. You will fear becoming weak again. Final words. If this message spoke to you, do not ignore it. Use it. Apply it. Train yourself to become stronger in silence. Because every day you avoid discipline is another day weakness grows. But every day you face yourself, you become harder to break. If you made it this far, comment the word strong mind below. Let others know that you are choosing discipline over distraction. Like this video if you want more powerful Stoic lessons. Share this video with at least 7 people who need to hear this message. And subscribe for more videos that will help you become stronger, calmer, and more dangerous than ever before.